You didn't believe she was dead?
For a long time. I just refused to accept that she was gone.
It wasn't just ink on paper. It was a final whisper from a woman who had once rattled the monarchy simply by refusing to remain silent. A letter, penned by Diana, Princess of Wales, now rested firmly in Prince William's hands, carrying decades of secrets and unsaid truths. It had been hidden for years, folded carefully, protected by time, wrapped in the quiet of secrecy. But on this grey, rain-slicked morning, charged with tension that seemed to hang in the air like a storm, its words were finally being read aloud. Not in secret, not in sorrow, but in a courtroom. A letter that demanded attention, a voice that refused to be silenced, and a truth that would no longer be ignored. Outside Westminster Crown Court, rain tapped against umbrellas like a ticking clock, relentless and urgent. A crowd had gathered, supporters, skeptics, and the merely curious. Some held signs with Diana's name, others with just a single word: justice. Police kept the barriers firm, while journalists jostled for position, elbow to elbow, hoping to capture the story, hoping for a clue beyond the headlines. But the real storm was not outside. It was swelling inside those hallowed walls of the courtroom. The gallery was packed. No cameras allowed, yet every gaze, every subtle movement was recorded in the minds of the onlookers. On the left sat King Charles and Queen Camilla, poised yet tense. Camilla's attire was simple, her fingers laced tightly in her lap. Her expression was calm, almost too calm, but the twitch in her jaw and the stillness of her eyes betrayed her to anyone paying attention. She knew. She always had. Prince William entered, not just as a royal figure, but as a son. His composure was perfect, practiced, polished. But beneath the surface, it was something far deeper than grief. It was resolve, the kind forged in years of silent observation and restrained emotion, a strength shaped not by impulse, but by long-held vigilance. He approached the witness stand, took the oath, cleared his throat, and faced the courtroom with quiet authority. His voice trembled, but his words were unwavering. "My name is William Arthur Philip Lewis," he began, steadying himself. "I am the son of Diana, Princess of Wales, and what I share today is not about revenge, it is about remembrance and justice." A hush fell over the room. The air seemed suspended, drawn in as one collective breath. His eyes swept over the judge, the jury, the gallery, and then, unflinchingly, locked onto Camilla. "I remember her laugh," he continued, softer now. "The way she would bring light to the darkest days, how she whispered truths to me when she thought I wasn't listening, things I didn't understand then but do now." The room held its breath. William did not falter. In her final weeks, Diana had been afraid. She said her phones were tapped, her routes had been altered. Without warning, she feared that someone within the royal institution was working against her. And 1 week before her death, she put it all in writing. William held up a copy of the letter. Diana's handwriting unmistakable, her voice frozen in ink. "They are planning something," he read aloud. "If anything happens to me, look back to the palace." Gasps rippled like distant thunder. The jury shifted, leaning forward. Camilla blinked but said nothing. Only the tension in her folded fingers betrayed her. King Charles leaned in slightly but remained silent. There was nothing to say. William's gaze never wavered. What had been dismissed as paranoia, a mother's anxiety, now demanded attention. She knew. And now, so did the world. The room teetered on the edge of eruption, yet William continued. Not loud, not angry, but with devastating clarity. "She said, if anything happens, look here. And I have," he said, his voice cracking. "That is why we are here today. Not to accuse blindly, but to finally acknowledge what has been whispered behind closed doors for far too long. Not weakness, but the weight of a son who had carried too much for too long. She told me the truth," he said, "and I will not let her be forgotten." Camilla remained silent. But something shifted behind her eyes, like a door slamming closed too late. Her composure was intact, but the silence around her had grown deafening. The courtroom was still, but no longer calm. The truth had finally found its voice. The judge called a recess. William returned to his seat, the letter folded once more in his hand. Headlines were already forming in the minds of the press, ready to erupt. But none of that mattered in this moment. What mattered was this. The unspoken had been spoken, the invisible made visible, and the ghost of Diana was no longer quiet. In that stillness, her words rang louder than ever. If anything happens to me, look back to the palace, and her son had done exactly that. Uncovering a mysterious and chilling revelation, the court reconvened under the same grey skies that had cloaked the morning session. The mood had shifted, not chaotic, but charged with expectancy. Prince William rose once more, his face composed, yet the resolve beneath had sharpened. In his hand, he now held 2 documents, a note and a letter, both in Diana's unmistakable handwriting. He approached the stand deliberately, every step measured, every breath controlled. He unfolded the note, paused, then lifted his eyes to the jury. He read the room with careful silence. When he paused after the first sentence, his gaze swept across the courtroom and landed briefly, but decisively, on Camila. Flipping the page, he read again. My mother predicted specific threats being plotted within the palace. This wasn't paranoia, it was preparation. His voice tightened. And still, they dismissed her as afraid. But what if she was right? Whispers rippled like electricity. The jury leaned forward. Some gasped. Camilla, stoic moments before, shifted in her seat, hands now tense. King Charles remained motionless, eyes fixed ahead, expression unreadable. Then, without warning, the courtroom doors clicked open. A tall man entered, older, worn, but familiar to some. Trevor Jones, Diana's last bodyguard. He hadn't appeared publicly in years, yet now, summoned as Prince William's first witness, his presence drew murmurs of recognition. He took the stand with quiet confidence, nodding once at William. August 30th, he began, voice steady yet scarred. We were at the Ritz. The plan changed minutes before departure. Silence gripped the room. Diana usually had Scotland Yard protection, he continued, but that night it was sidelined. Local security stepped in, and Henry Paul, who we later learned was nearly 4 times over the limit, took the wheel. His eyes glinted with something unspoken. I voiced my concerns, but Doty overruled me. He trusted Paul, Trevor said, voice softening, almost haunted. We left through the back entrance into the tunnel, and after that everything happened too fast. A grainy image flickered on the screen behind him, a blurred photo of the black Mercedes, seconds before disaster. Trevor's voice wavered. I woke up in hospital, broken bones, 4 minutes unaccounted for, but I remember her voice, Diana moaning, calling for Doty. He looked straight at Camilla. The security plan had been changed, protocol ignored. This wasn't an oversight, it was engineered. The courtroom dropped into stunned silence. Camilla, caught between memory and reality, folded her arms and looked away. Her mind drifted to the places she had spent years avoiding, dark corners of regret and secrets. Her silence shattered suddenly, pierced by a sharp, deliberate voice. Prince William! He stepped forward, holding up a black binder. I present to the court declassified MI5 documents, he said, calm but commanding. These documents contain audio recordings, he continued, voice steady. Once my mother recorded herself, evidence of what she feared. The courtroom murmured, stunned into disbelief. A clerk pressed play, and Diana's voice filled the chamber. Calm, clear, unmistakable. If I die, this recording must be heard. It wasn't just fear, it was certainty. There are people in places I trusted. They know what's at stake. A collective gasp swept through the room. The judge struck the gavel, demanding order. But the truth had already landed, sharp and unavoidable. William returned to the microphone, unwavering. These tapes confirm her fears, but they prove more. She was being watched. She knew it. She documented everything. Flipping another page in the binder, he read aloud Diana's handwriting. I feel boxed in. Shadows are growing around me. I'm not sure who I can trust, but if I'm not here one day, look to those closest. Look to the throne. Silence descended like a heavy curtain. Each word fell like a stone dropped in still water. Outside, cameras flashed, but inside the courtroom, time itself seemed to pause. Camilla remained frozen, but the storm behind her eyes was growing louder with each heartbeat. Then William's voice cut through, calm, unyielding, directed squarely at her. Madam, You were in that room the night before she died. You overheard the conversation, you heard the plotting, and you said nothing. The words didn't need volume to strike hard. The courtroom froze. Camila looked up, glassy-eyed, her lips parted, then pressed together. Her chest rose and fell. William did not flinch. "I am not here for vengeance," he said, measured but firm. "I am here to ask for the truth. That is all my mother ever wanted. That is the only thing that can begin to heal what has been done." His voice softened, yet carried unmistakable strength. "This court demands facts, clarity, acknowledgement." He inhaled one final breath, steadying himself. "For years we've lived in uncertainty. Now it's the palace's turn to answer." Camilla began to tremble. King Charles placed a hand on hers, but it did little to quiet the storm behind her eyes. The judge called another recess, instructing the jury to deliberate on the new evidence. William sat, face unreadable, but outside the courtroom, the story had already spread. Headlines flashed across news feeds. William produces MI5 tapes, points to the throne in Diana's death. Inside, none of that mattered. Only the truth mattered now. When the court adjourned for the day, no verdict had been reached. Only questions now with faces. Camilla left the courtroom flanked by 2 guards, face blank, hands trembling as flashes from cameras lit the storm around her. She blinked twice, then disappeared into the car without a word. Something had fractured inside her. A battle between loyalty and silence, love and guilt. King Charles remained behind, alone in the shadowed hallway. Watching the remnants of the day fall into place, he felt the foundation beneath the crown begin to crack. Somewhere in his mind, a single thought settled, heavy as dust. If the full truth came to light, the crown itself would be forced to answer for more than just memory, more than just the cracks of palace protocol. When the court reconvened, the atmosphere shifted again, this time from anticipation to tense stillness. No murmurs, no shuffling notes, nothing but absolute silence, like a church just before confession. Prince William rose, a portrait of composure etched with grief and resolve. His eyes landed on Camilla, pausing long enough for meaning to settle. Then he began. "Someone in this room knows why my mother is not with us anymore," he said, voice calm, measured, carrying the weight of accusation. "She was my mother, loved, praised by those who knew her, but we failed to protect her. And now I know for certain, someone here held a grudge. It wasn't volume that shook the room, it was truth." Eyes turned as one, cameras zoomed on Camilla. Her hands trembled in her lap, lips pressed tight, pale and quivering. And in an instant, the facade she had worn for decades cracked. The queen consort, long revered for her composure, unravelled before a watching world. It was not whispered in secret, not speculated in hushed corridors. It was public, historic, real. William held an envelope. Inside, a letter not addressed to him, but to his younger brother. The handwriting unmistakably Diana's, defiant, fearful, haunting. He opened it without ceremony and read aloud. The words were warnings, not pleasantries. Written 2 years before her death, they spoke of engineered disaster, of a path cleared for Charles, of Diana's life placed in jeopardy. Each line clung to the walls like fog. William's voice darkened with each syllable, accusations deliberate and controlled. "Camilla," he said at last, eyes locking onto hers, "you knew what happened. When questions arose, when accusations surfaced, did you speak? Did you protect her memory? Or did you protect your place?" The room seemed to tilt. Whispers turned to murmurs, curling around Camilla like a tide. She said nothing. But William's words pressed on. "As innocent as we appear on the surface, our choices betray our truth. To do no harm yet remain still, that is complicity by silence." The courtroom reacted like a storm slowly building. Faces hardened, some turned away, others watched unmoved. Camilla felt it all. Her body tensed, eyes flicking between William and Charles. The king remained still, silent, carved from stone, choosing not to intervene. Finally, she whispered, almost to herself, voice faint, barely reaching the microphones. No one would have heard it, but it was too late. The weight of William's final statement landed like a hammer. Diana never wanted a throne. She wanted to be a mother, a woman of grace, a symbol of empathy in a world built on appearances. She gave all of that to the world. But someone who coveted what she had, cut it short. The room broke. A sharp, guttural sound emerged from one corner of the gallery, raw and uncontrolled. Heads turned. It wasn't a witness. It wasn't protest. It was Camila. She sobbed openly, hands clenched as if to contain what no longer could be contained. Tears fell, and with them, every last thread of control she had clung to unravelled completely. The court tried to continue, but her cries pierced every corner of the chamber. Reporters leaned over their desks, pens stilled mid-note, cameras zooming once more, not on William, but on the Queen Consort. Broken, exposed, vulnerable. The judge struck the gavel once, then again, finally shouting above the rising noise, "Court is adjourned." Panic moved in waves, sweeping through the courtroom like a tide. Journalists surged forward. Commentators whispered urgently into microphones, already composing the evening's headlines. The courtroom emptied in fragments. Some quietly, some shaken, all irrevocably changed. Outside, the crowd murmured, weighed down by the tension. Their conversations fractured into noise, their doubts amplified by the scene they had just witnessed. Among them, a diplomat murmured words that would soon echo across every news outlet. Only 55% of Britain's population now believed in the monarchy's importance. The lowest point since 1983, the institution, so tightly tied to silence, now faced a far more dangerous threat. Exposure. Camilla's collapse had become more than scandal. It had become a reckoning. Was it guilt or regret? Shame or sorrow? Whatever it was, her sobs rang louder than any defense she could offer. And the image, the hunched figure, tears unchecked, would loop endlessly across screens around the world. She had not set the trap. She had not issued commands, but she had been present. She had listened. And then she said nothing. The court of public opinion began its own quiet sentencing that evening. As the storm swirled beyond the palace walls, Prince William stepped briefly into the media pit. He said nothing, met no gaze. He walked straight to his waiting car, into the arms of his wife. Kate embraced him quietly, whispering barely audibly, "You did the right thing." She would be proud, but William felt no pride. Only the hollow truth that follows after a secret has been stripped bare. He had spoken. He had drawn the curtain. But he did not know what grief might follow. Camila, meanwhile, had disappeared into her quarters. She was no longer a queen to the public. She had become something else, a meme, a scandal, a sobbing figure caught under 1,000 lenses. That night, she wrote a letter, not to Charles, not to the court, but to William. "Tomorrow I will speak. My answer will be not guilty. But before I stand, you must know, I share your grief, even if I was never asked to carry it." At 8 p.m., a private royal broadcast interrupted the evening news. It wasn't an interview, wasn't damage control. It was a decision, a final one. The screen showed Camila, her eyes still red but no longer weeping. Her voice was quiet, yet resolute. "Being a woman devoted to duty," she began, "I apologize for the discomfort my presence has caused this family and this nation. My apology must be matched with action. Therefore, I hereby renounce my position as Queen Consort. I relinquish all royal duties, all titles, and will return to a private life beside my husband." The screen faded to black. The palace issued no follow-up statement. None was needed. The truth had already been spoken. And once truth is spoken, it does not return to silence. The brothers reunited quietly. No further statements, no clarifications, no confirmations. From the palace, the press office, or even the king. The message from Camila, her handwritten note to Prince William, vanished as quickly as it had arrived. And so did she. No photographs of her departure. No footage of a farewell, only silence. The kind the crown has always preferred. It cloaked the palace in a familiar fog of discretion, but even silence, when stretched too far, begins to echo behind palace walls. The corridors remained orderly, windows closed, marble floors polished. Yet something had shifted in the air. Not a resignation, but something quieter, more uncertain. Rumours began to rise. Not through headlines, but in whispers. Insiders murmured tensions, quietly compounding within the royal family. The Queen Consort had stepped back, yet the ripple she left behind continued expanding that morning. Far from London's watchful eyes, the sun had only begun to warm the gravel paths at Althorp, hanging low in the sky, casting long, soft shadows across the estate grounds. Prince William walked ahead, footsteps deliberate. Harry followed, hands in coat pockets, face unreadable. The two brothers hadn't visited together in years, but after weeks of upheaval, they walked side by side toward the place where time had stood still for them since 1997. They reached the resting place together. No words, none were needed. Their grief had never required language. It was understood, a continuous, unbroken thread between them. William stopped at the headstone, hand brushing against freshly placed flowers. He turned slightly, meeting Harry's gaze. A glance, a nod. Enough for a moment. The world around them disappeared. Cameras, history, the weight, all gone. Just two sons mourning the same woman in the same silence they had known as boys. William thought of their childhood fights, loud, childish, but always resolved within hours. Diana had made sure of that. She had taught them that anger is fleeting, but love is anchored. And here, now, in this quiet place, the lesson endured. Their stillness spoke everything. Back in London, the public remained unaware of the reunion unfolding miles away. The media wrestled with polling numbers. Approval for the monarchy slipped. Only 29% now said it was very important. More than half were indifferent. A younger generation, born after Diana's death, barely responded. Loyalty no longer inherited, it drifted. But something else was forming, something new. Perhaps the dawn of an era not built on pageantry, but memory. Perhaps a day would come when the younger generation remembered not what the crown represented, but who had worn it, and at what cost. That morning, an unofficial, unposed photo surfaced. William and Harry walking shoulder to shoulder at Althorp. It spread slowly at first, then swiftly. The public noticed, not for drama, but for its rarity. Sometimes the rarest things carry the deepest meaning. The retreat of a queen, far from the noise. In a small cottage on Windsor's edge, Camila watched the sky dim through her window. Her world had shrunk to a quiet routine. No aides, no engagements, no red boxes delivered. Calendar blank. For the first time in decades, her gaze was unguarded. She had surrendered titles, relinquished ceremonies. Official duties had ended, but the weight had not disappeared. It had simply redistributed. The palace moved on, but she remained in that still room, reflecting on everything she had said and left unsaid. The silence that protected her finally made space for understanding, not forgiveness, not absolution, just enough to live with it. The following morning, the news cycle erupted. Every station reported variations of the same truth. Camilla steps away, a monarchy reborn. Parliament considers reform. Talk shows debated legacy. Radio hosts opened lines to callers. Screens flickered between outrage and relief. In Glasgow, a teenager scrolled past polling results. An older couple watched over tea. One nodded silently. The other whispered, "It's time." On one channel, William's voice resurfaced in archival footage, suddenly more relevant than ever. Justice is not always about punishment. Sometimes it is simply the truth. Finally, that truth was being heard. Camilla's departure was not a fall from grace, it was a reckoning. A quiet exit, acknowledging pain without spectacle. She had not vanished as a villain. She had walked away, undone by consequence, perhaps redeemed by restraint. For decades of following the saga, one truth emerged. Legacy is not assigned by birthright. It is forged by choices, timing, and the courage to step aside when no longer meant to stand at the centre. Camilla's name faded again. Not erased, not condemned, but folded quietly into history. This time with a different kind of silence. Justice, it turned out, was not retribution. It was acceptance. Healing from no longer pretending the past never happened. Should the royal family have done more? Spoken sooner? Was Camilla's final act courage, confession, or simply too little, too late? These questions remain. The crown is more than jewels and metal. It is memory, And sometimes it is the silence that follows after someone finally tells the truth. What do you think about the royal family? Do you believe the future is transitioning to Prince William and Kate? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to like, share and subscribe to this channel before you watch the other videos displayed on your screen. Every opinion matters. Every voice adds to the conversation about legacy, power and accountability. The monarchy is not just about crowns and ceremonies, it is about people, choices and consequences that ripple through generations. By engaging, sharing and discussing, you become part of the history being written right now. Don't stay silent. Comment, share and be heard.